Hello.
Hey, everybody, it's Isaac and it's Josh in...
That one's Isaac. This one's Josh.
Yeah, it's about... it's a high of 97, a low of 78.
Yeah, but we...
With air the consistency of pea soup.
Man, but guess what? We got the new microphone. We got the air conditioner. We're finally in trucks heaven.
Yeah, I mean, this is still not ideal by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but it's much, much better.
And I imagine it will be a smoother listening experience for y'all.
The trucks are going to be to a much higher
our voices
standard.
In distressing nasal clarity, which is my favorite nasal thing except for mute nostril agony, which brings us to the topic of favorite musics.
Yes, we got a question.
Tumblr user Waterwarp said to four triangles. Since you asked recently for Truck's questions/topics, I'd be interested to hear you talk about some of each of your favorite albums, both of all time and from recent years. Unless this A is something you've discussed before, blah-de-blah-de-boo-bah. So, I don't know, we've kind of shied away from talking about music.
It has been a while since we've had a good music Trucks.
Even though Josh and I are both, like,
way into
music guys.
People don't like it when we talk about music on Trucks.
I think, I'm not sure, we kind of inferred that from the time we had Dunk on to talk about music reviewing, and it was like our least watched Trucks ever.
It's been more than once. I
but
feel like
maybe that's just because people don't like him.
Who wants to listen to people talk about music?
Right, it's like dancing about architecture, as somebody said. I didn't make that one up.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a problem with talking about music, which is that it's fundamentally difficult to not sound either like a big old technocrat or like a jerk.
Yeah.
Like a big old douchebag, like a hipster fuck.
But that's cool. We're going to do our best.
Yeah. And
it'll probably, knowing us, devolve into a conversations about music.
Yeah, no,
but that's true. That's totally fine.
I swear to God, like, I'm a elitist, my tastes are so interesting person about a lot of stuff. But I've historically gotten more pushback over music than I have over everybody else, because I think that there is something about talking about music that just immediately has people framing the conversation in so you think you're better than me kind of a...
Right. Allow me to be the guy who says the jerk thing, which is that we expect music to be immediate, right? So when music does the thing we like art to do in general, which is challenge us a little.
Oh, you're a jerk.
Yeah, I'm a jerk. People don't like it. People don't like it. People just aren't as prepared for that.
Well, I plan to talk mostly about music that I think is relatively easy, because that's the stuff that I actually like. You can go off in your Autechre hole.
I'm going to avoid talking. I'll talk about the knife instead of Autechre.
I don't like that either.
maybe I'll talk about both. We'll see. We'll see.
Anyway.
I've got to play you some good Autechre one of these days.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know who's been into Autechre lately? Has been Kate Wirtz. Kate Wirtz has been
cool.
Has been posting a lot of Autechre. So it's all the rage if Kate Wirtz is into it.
But I think we decided that we were going to tackle this in roughly a chronological kind of order.
Yeah, I thought it would be more interesting to talk about like albums that were big in our minds at various developmental milestones of our lives.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a big dork, and I was particularly a big dork growing up. So, like, after a initial period of quite good musical taste that lasted until I was about 5, I had sort of a bit of a dry spell in terms of liking acceptable music, and so maybe that'll humanize me. That's the worst thing I've ever said.
Dude, are we going to talk about Momus on this track?
I think we decided that we wanted to give Momus his very own Trucks. Momus hangs over us with such pendulousness.
Ooh, that's a word I don't know.
His danglies are so dangly.
Yeah, that's true.
That, as has been demonstrated in many a Photoshop selfie, many a Photoshop nude selfie from the man, that we want to talk about the ways in which we disagree about which Momus songs are good. As a sort of its own thing.
So no Momus.
Yeah, but maybe they'll. I mean, I don't know, man.
Go first.
It's like 4 minutes in. We haven't
let's
even
just dive in. What's the first?
Too much context.
If I were to ask you, what was your first album? Would you have an answer?
Yes, "Gift from a Flower to a Garden" by Donovan, specifically the second disc, which is to this day a really great album to go to sleep to. It's full of gentle Welsh lullabies and songs about starfish, and it's all kind of sad and a little bit mystical.
Nice.
And it's full of like, In the golden garden, bird of peace, stands the silver girl, the wild jewel's niece.
Oh my.
And so forth. He's Donovan is great. Donovan claims to have invented folk music, essentially, and also like several other kinds of music, which he clearly didn't invent. And he's a big ol' liar, and he lives in a castle, and he's Welsh, and I love him.
Cool.
But that album was my first album. How about you?
I don't remember the name of it, but I remember some of the music. I think what happened to me when I was a kid was I encountered Sandstorm by Darude and thought, this is the best.
Already we begin to see where our paths differ.
Like, before that, I listened to what my parents played in the car, and I liked a lot of it, you
Yeah.
know? But the first thing I remember I liked,
Yeah.
was shitty trance music. And I was way into an old, I think they called them shoutcasts back then, an internet radio station that played trance called Digitally Imported.
I'm having a hard time dealing with how young you are right now.
I'm sorry, man. I mean, at this point, I must have been like...
Yeah, you can't. I'm talking this album for me was like I'm 5. I'm 5 and 6.
When I was 5, it was Ultravox. You know, listening to my dad listen to Ultravox and Paul Simon. And
Paul Simon was huge for me as well.
Sure.
I can sing so many Paul Simon songs.
Where are you going?
Oh, Vienna!
Yeah, there you go. That's not Paul Simon.
It means nothing to me.
Yeah, that was good. I liked the fast ones more so. I liked my favorite was I can't get up and walk away to sing it, so I'll just not. I won't belt it quite as much.
Okay,
but
do it.
Dancing with tears in my eyes.
Oh, that was beautiful. This is going to be like a musical montage. I think we should have to perform a tiny bit of everything that we mentioned.
That might not be possible.
People are going to when you get to Aphex Twin.
I mean, very quickly this is going to get hard for me. But no, yes.
Josh, move away from words early.
The album I was looking for, it had something, a sound like, I'm sorry, a name like Future Groove or something. It was just, my mom took me to Tower Records. I looked around the electronic section. I can't remember if this one had headphones that I could listen to it through or not.
You picked up like a Euro disco comp.
Yeah, exactly. It was trance. It was pretty okay. It was, it was a continuous mix. It was my first encounter with that idiom.
Oh, that's very exciting.
It was pretty cool. Like, I was like, whoa, it's all just one really long song that has a constant BPM and kind of just keeps playing with rhythms. I remember the first track was my favorite. It had like a kind of Gregorian chant effect, kind of in a reverby sense. It was a lot of fun. And
the first album I owned that was a continuous mix was much, much later in my life, and it was the extended original Secret of Mana soundtrack.
Yeah.
Done by the guy who made that soundtrack, who was also kind of like a, junglist.
Yeah.
In his spare time.
I think I've heard this fucking abomination.
It's fantastic. Shut up. So there was that for me. Mm-hmm. There was also the fact that I was a performer from a young age, and what I would do is I would take a mattress and I would pull it halfway down like a bed or another surface so that it formed a slope. And then I would take a boombox and I would put in one of my favorite tapes, which was, I think, there was The Best of the Cars, and there was Stop Making Sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I did it to the Eurythmics, but it would have made sense for me to have done it to the Eurythmics. But I remember, and I think a band called ABC also. And then I would play the tape in the boombox, and then I would jump on the mattress for the duration of the side of the tape. And I would make my parents and whoever happened to be guests observe me do this.
Damn.
And applaud at the end of every song.
That's pretty good.
As I took my tumbles and so forth.
Dude, you know what I listened to before that trance album was?
What?
I can't put it into order, but Eiffel 65, the album that had Blue on it.
Oh, but would you care to favor us with a dabba dee dabba da?
I'm blue, dabba dee dabba die.
Oh, sorry.
Dabba dee dabba die.
Thank you.
Dabba dee dabba die.
Yes.
Dabba dee dabba die. I would attempt to. I would always insist that we played this thing in the car, and I would always attempt to sing along. And I'm pretty sure that half the time I was, like a half step behind, like thinking I had memorized the words, but actually just kind of singing them after I heard them. I was probably a huge pain in the ass, but thanks to my whole family for letting me do that anyway, because I really loved that album.
There you go.
Playstation.
Hey!
Terrible album. Not recommended.
So obviously for me originally it was my hippie / hipster parents' music taste, which is also where I got the Paul Simon, who was big for me as well. When I started to seek out my own stuff, it was mostly comedy music. I was big into Tom Lehrer.
Yes.
I was big into...
I remember pulling a lot of Weird Al tracks off of Napster. Most of which weren't actually Weird Al.
Napster was later in my life. Napster was how I found Momus.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Napster aside, what my equivalent of Napster was going to the library, getting LPs from other libraries on interlibrary loan, and then dubbing them onto cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Which I would listen to on the Walkman that I carried with me everywhere. But yeah, Peter Schickele, Tom Lehrer, like old Python stuff, and assorted related acts, and the Fireside Theater, who were not really music, but had music occasionally. And so that was pretty much it. Until I discovered punk in high school.
Yours is such a cool path through music.
I thought I was incredibly dorky at the time. I mean, the people in my high school were into or
maybe rather than cool, I should say classic.
Maybe
There's a comforting familiarity to it. It could be the subject of a Breakfast Club type of movie. That's dorky kid getting into punk.
I guess so. I mean, it's not like I was into, real punk was kind of a little bit too weird for me at the time. I needed to have punk that had the edges cut off a little bit. It was Blink-182 first, and like The Offspring, and then Bad Religion and the Vandals, who are still... Bad Religion and the Vandals are still to this day very important to me. If we want, hey, this is an album that was very important for me, I would say all 4 of the classic Bad Religion albums on one tape, which you could kind of do. So that's Suffer, Against the Grain, No Control, and Generator.
Is it my turn?
Yes, absolutely.
Chemical Brothers.
There you go.
In this
I think that's cooler.
In this period of my life when I was looking through fucking Tower Records for just stuff, I encountered a thing called Chemical Brothers Singles 1993 to 2003, which was just all the big radio singles off their albums from that period. And this thing was just jam-packed with bangers. And they became kind of it was like the highest quality thing I'd listened to up until that point, intentionally. And it became the first album that I really absorbed on an album level in a way. That sounds weird because that continuous mix kind of worked that way for me, but
you're thinking about it in terms of hey, here's the way the album works.
This is the arc.
Rises and falls and so
in
forth.
In this case, it was it's chronological, but it got me to look at it got me to look up the albums that my favorite tracks on this thing were from, and to identify the differences in character between those albums. And as a result of that, they became the first band that I started looking out for their next release, which was a shame because I started getting into them just as they really started to blow hard.
It's a shame.
But
that's always the way, isn't it?
But I didn't know that as a kid.
I found out about They Might Be Giants right at the end of their golden period as well.
Yeah. But listening to the Chemical Brothers as a kid was an interesting experience. Did you ever have this, when you were quite young and listening to music? Chemical Brothers, of course, is quite trippy music. And I would have an experience a bit like getting high when I was just listening.
Oh my God,
music as a kid.
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I would...
And
it was going to be the closest thing that I would do to get high because, as I mentioned, I was incredibly square.
Sure.
But, I would be off my tits on music at the appropriate point. That's the thing, the barriers between you and the world are so soft, and music is the art that circumvents your brain.
Yeah.
All the parts of your brain that keep you from experiencing things are the verbal, the parts that take things apart. What am I looking for?
I don't know.
Whatever, the analytical bits, and music just goes zoot right around the edge.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good stuff, man. But yeah, no, it definitely was. Which brings me to my next thing. So my first real contact with like indie rock came about in what I feel is like an extremely me way.
Yeah.
In that I watched a lot of Powerpuff Girls when they were on.
Yeah.
And they put out an album of songs by kind of like, there was a lot of like, I don't even know how to describe the tranche of indie rockers that were on this album. But there was a lot of like, you know, sort of you know, not quite Riot Girl, but like sort of poppy punky girl bands, like lo-fi girl bands.
Yeah.
Like Dressy Bessy. And then there was Frank Black, because Frank Black would never turn down anything. Frank Black also turned up on the indie rock stars reimagined the music of Hedwig and the Angry Inch comp that came out years ago. Frank Black would do anything.
Right. I'm still very fond of one of his They Might Be Giants covers.
Yeah, but that is how, like, that's how I got to the Pixies.
Right.
You know,
right.
That's how I made my contact with like, you know, hip indie rock is via this compilation that had like Shona Knife on it, and Biss, who did the Powerpuff Girls closing theme, the original Powerpuff Girls closing theme.
I didn't fucking know that Biss did that.
Yeah.
That explains how one would hear about them.
And so,
oh man,
this is my next like super. I was so into this at like the end of high school and early college album is Biss's album Social Dancing.
An album I know, a band rather, I know that we were both really into for a period was the Delgados.
That you got from the opening theme of Gunslinger.
Yeah, you knew about them before that, right?
No, I didn't.
You didn't.
I ought to have, right?
I see.
Because I was into Chemical Underground, I was into business stuff, but I never bothered to listen to the Delgados.
Oh man!
And so the first time I was actually consciously heard the Delgados was also at the OP of Gunslinger Girl,
which is a striking OP.
It's really impressive. That was from their maximalist period.
Yes,
the Delgados had
in a big way.
Like the Delgados started out as this incredibly scrappy punk band, and they founded their own label in Glasgow, and they you can tell that I haven't slept very much this week, and they.
Monica's greeting Nick outside.
Yeah, nobody can hear that. And then as they found their own label and got more resources, all like, you know, this is all like no money compared to anything on a major label, but as they got more and more resources, they got more and more ambitious with their orchestration.
Right.
And there's this sweet spot that happens just about at Peloton and the Great Eastern, where they were sort of halfway between this scrappy like indie punk band and this pop, you know, sort of this complicated pop band, and then they overbalanced in this enormous way and became incredibly glurgy and sweeping and sentimental, and that's where we found them.
They got the fucking producer from like the Flaming Lips albums to start working on their shit there.
It's like, and this
very
song starts with
producer.
Like, you know, it's in like that slow heavy metal 3, you know.
God, they fucking
They have the choir, and then the drums that are so distorted and blown out.
They're blown out like crazy. For a long time, that song was always what I would use to test out a new pair of headphones. Just to see how well they would communicate that mess.
How shitty can we make this drum sound? You know, I'm just like.
Well, we reached our destination way too fast.
Yeah, no, I told you this one looked too short. This needs to be a 2-parter.
Yeah.
I'm barely out of
adolescence.
Yeah, at this point. So that was an insight. I think we should probably release this as one trucks, though. I don't think that we should do like 3 weeks in a row of music trucks.
Early music. Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Oh, man.
Well, we're just going to continue this seamlessly on, so let's just keep on with the conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I think we ought to.
What was next for me?
So
or are you not done with your...
Social Dancing being my favorite album. This is like end of high school, beginning of college for me.
Yeah, cool.
So where are you at?
I think in high school now, when I discovered Boards of Canada, which I must have talked about Boards of Canada at some point. I talked about their new one when it came out on here, and that probably gave me occasion to talk about Music Has the Right to Children, which that was the real thing for me right there. Like that is the album that introduced me to the genre that I am still all about, IDM. This is, you know, ground zero for my Autechre obsession. But holy mackerel, what an album Music Has the Right to Children is. I can't perform a section of it, but it's basically 3...
I can.
Oh, yeah?
23, 46, 90, 2010.
Yeah, close enough.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Orange.
Meanwhile, yes, orange.
Orange.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Yeah, really good album. It's got three parts to it, 3 ingredients that just come together so beautifully. One of them is warbly old synthesizers done with old analog equipment, like you would have heard in 80s, 70s era, like documentaries, like library music type stuff.
Yep.
Second one is these screwed up hip hop beats that just kind of will tear your head off. And the third part is why am I so...
You're stuck.
Not very. Only a little.
You're scraping your tubes, dude. I can't believe we haven't looked at our tubes.
How do we haven't mentioned the large tubes?
I mean, they're pretty large, those tubes, and they're glistening in the sun.
It's so good that this is buying us time.
Yeah.
To talk about nothing but our tubes.
Talking about tubes of Canada. Oh, no.
I just caused a big problem. The third ingredient in Boards of Canada, that particular album at least, is... kind of unrecognizable vocal samples.
Yep.
Like, it's the sound of grown-ups talking in the room when you're a kid and you can't understand what they're saying. And somehow those 3 things just come together into this amazing blend that signifies a kind of nostalgic warmth at the same time as the unease of growing up.
Hey, solid.
But while, at the same time being just a really fun listen.
Mm-hmm.
Great album. Of these I've listed so far, it's the first that I still go back to often.
Yeah, I don't think that I've actually even gotten to one that I go back to often at this point, but I have to tell you...
You go back to this sometimes.
Social Dancing is an excellent album if you like electropop, and if you like pumping your head and pumping your fist, or if you like sort of electro or goth music generally.
Not that long.
That's a good one, though. It gets us past some place we haven't been before.
We don't want to more than double the length of this Trex. We want to approximately double the length of this Trex.
Okay.
We'll pass through Reading if we do this.
All right, let's do that.
Let's do this.
Let's do that one. Okay.
You were saying?
I was saying, I still go back to Business occasionally. It's a great electropop album if you're into electropop, and it's not something that people are very into a lot of the time. Where are we?
Not only is it one of these situations, but the screen is frozen.
Oh, jeez. That's terrible. That's terrible news. Also, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden is an excellent album.
By whom?
By Donovan. But only the second disc, and only if you're in a very particular mood. Here we go.
Boing.
There we go.
I'm sure that'll only happen once.
Mm-hmm. So first year of college is when I basically started trying to teach myself to have good music taste. I started reading Pitchfork, which was still in its hilarious, poorly designed website infancy. How you found stuff on Pitchfork at the point where I started reading it was that they had the letters A through Z up at the top of the navigation page, and you clicked on one of the letters and it listed all of the albums that they had reviewed by a band that started with that letter.
Look, Isaac, there it is. The thing that ends the Trex. The thing, the impossible obstacle, the impassable barrier.
And we're only at the top of the trucks right now.
Well, we're midway through the Trex.
This is going to be a hassle and no mistake.
I just don't... How do you even line up for this, dude? It's so narrow. Why would you just get this shit out of here, you know? Like, without these things, this would just be a nice, wide dirt road.
Maybe if you press E, it'll skip you over to the other side.
Oh my god, dude.
I'm sorry, we have to stop and watch Josh be, like, completely confounded by this.
This is, like, high stakes goddamn stuff, dude.
Because we're going to have to abort this entire mission if we can't even get out of this feedlot or whatever the fuck it is.
Okay,
I think you need to approach
I need to
from the
drive
other side.
all the way around this circle.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, so I started reading Pitchfork, and I like read their best of the 80s and best of the 90s lists. Mm-hmm. And I started trying to listen to albums that they had really liked. And I got some stuff that I liked out of that.
Yeah,
but,
I went through that same thing.
Yeah, but The ones that felt like the most idiosyncratically me were generally not the ones that they praised.
Yeah.
And what I mostly found there was a lot of bands that were acclaimed that I didn't like. And so I was like, oh man, am I ever going to have taste that's acceptable?
I discovered Beirut from doing that Pitchfork thing the first time in like 2008.
That's reasonable
That
to
was
do.
a fun phase when I liked Beirut. Don't like them anymore, but they were nice to like.
I had some like albums that I got through, just trying to be acceptable that were important. Like the third Velvet Underground album was very big for my first year of college.
Yeah,
the
I
self-titled one.
did it.
You did it. Congratulations. David Byrne's first solo album, weirdly, Ray Momo, which I think is objectively bad, but was very important to me at the time. Frank Black's first solo album, which is, I think, good, but also not cool, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of thing. It was like kind of just sort of peeking my head out of the nerd cave. I mean, everything that I liked still had a bit of the They Might Be Giants-y quality about it at that juncture.
Yeah.
But how about you starting to get into college?
Well, for me, like, a lot of things happened just before college. After I got into Boards of Canada, something kind of flipped in my brain, and I started just looking for more and more weird stuff. And that's kind of the point when I became omnivorous. To be a jerk again, to describe myself as omnivorous, but like I got really into someone named help me with this first name. I think I've never been in the habit of pronouncing it correctly. Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Okay,
Ryuichi. Is that right?
Ryuichi.
Well, approximately Ryuichi.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, dude, like, these days I stick with his best stuff, I think, but, like, what impressed me about him at first was how he had, like, dipped his toes into everything. He was once this big, like, Japanese synth-pop star who started doing synth-pop before Kraftwerk even did, like, an unrecognized pioneer in that regard.
Yeah.
And, they weren't as good as Kraftwerk, Yellow Magic Orchestra, I mean, let's be honest. But, some really catchy shit.
As far as knockoffs go.
Yeah.
Which is what Japanese music specializes in.
Sure. Well, what were they a knockoff, though? Because they were doing it before Kraftwerk were.
Oh, there you go.
But, like, he's also known for movie soundtracks. But, like, I was really into this electronic album of his called Chasm, which also had a David Sylvian joint on it.
Yeah.
Just all these weird glitchy effects, which was very much in my idiom. But my favorite thing was that he was in my idiom, but he was also not in my idiom. So he became this bridge to all these other worlds, right?
Yeah.
He's probably partially responsible for my bossa nova thing, because he does a few like kind of, I guess you could call them pastiche bossa nova tracks.
I mean that's a great thing about loving an artist who is eclectic and does a lot of collaborating.
Yeah.
Momus was that for me, and I think
yeah.
like Momus was sort of the equivalent in my sort of music life of David Sylvian to yours, I think, just timing wise. But like he worked with a lot of different people, and also because he's very mercurial and hops from thing that he thinks is cool to thing that he thinks is cool.
Yeah.
Through him I found Brand Van 3000. Through him I found Stereo Total. I found like
Sakamoto will lead you to like Christian Fenez, who does these crazy guitar landscapes, and Alvanoto, who's super great at electronic minimalism. It's a wide variety of stuff. Sakamoto it's funny, Sakamoto loves working with people with a thing for texture, whereas he is such a melody guy. Like, if you know what I mean when I talk about like the anime soundtrack sound, that's all Sakamoto's fault.
Do 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 do.
Yeah.
Do 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 do. Which is Owen Pallett basically did exactly that, just with getting one note wrong on that track from
which.
It's on I'm not afraid, he said, of the non-believer within me.
Yeah, that never occurred to me.
Yeah, there's a whole Ryuichi Sakamoto bridge in the middle
of
that.
Oh yeah, the do 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 do.
Yeah.
Do 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 do. Yeah, that's very, very close. Maybe homage, maybe not, who knows? I mean, they're simple melodies, they feel like you've known them forever. The screen is frozen again, but that's okay.
It's getting hot in here. And we've already taken off most of our clothes.
I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed by how quickly the cool air left when we turned off the air conditioner.
It's the curse of the AC. I mean, you think, oh, I'll only use it a little bit and save on the electricity bill, and then you're like, oh, it's the difference between okay and not okay.
Yeah.
And I have to keep it on all the time.
But while Sakamoto's name is on the table, this is going to be a long, long trek. While Sakamoto's name is on the table, I have to mention an album he did with the husband and wife Morellenbaums, Paula and Jacques Morellenbaum.
Ooh, this is good stuff.
A vocalist and you've heard this album, a vocalist and a a cellist, that's what it is.
There you go. A bass violinist.
Yes. They did an album called Casa, where they went to Antonio Carlos Jobim's old house after he died by the fucking shore in Brazil and just played stripped down versions of a lot of his old songs, and it is the best.
There you go.
You can tell that
there's a rock ribbed album
like on his old piano, I think is what Sakamoto's playing, and like this simultaneously succeeds at being like pleasant listening in the way Jobim tracks always are, but also like that kind of reveal the virtuosic composition underneath them by doing them in that simpler version where the composition is more emphasized.
Yeah.
And it's also like obviously a spiritual exercise for them, like in a really sincere way. Like they talk, I think I watched an interview once where they talked about this album, and they talked about how a bird would frequently land on the windowsill and listen to them play, and they were all in agreement that the bird was Jobim himself.
Of course. How could it
come
not
to
be?
listen?
Spectacular.
It is just such an excellent piece of work, this album.
All right. So
moving on.
That. So I go through my first couple of years of college, and the point where I really start to open up to what's going on contemporaneously around me in the music world, and not just sort of dig through history trying to put together a lineage and a reference framework so that I can understand music.
Yeah.
Is my third year, somebody gives me a Shins album. And this is, if you are a member of my generation, the Garden State generation, this is...
Never, just go on.
It's the worst possible thing that could have happened to me. Thankfully, it wasn't that album. It wasn't the first Shins album, which is the one that it'll change your life. It was the second Shins album, even though the first Shins album is also good. But that was basically what awakened my taste for contemporary indie music and got me into the music that was happening around me at that time. And at that point, I was just lost. And it is from that point on that I have 9 billion favorite albums, essentially. It's that was where I've sort of been building my record collection out of stuff that I started listening to at that point.
Yeah.
But Shoots Too Narrow is still a great album, and I drove my girlfriend at the time absolutely crazy singing Saint Simon.
You're gonna have to send me the spelling of some of these things.
Mercy's eyes are blue. And so forth.
Oh man, I didn't sing any second
when she places them in front of you.
Oh my God.
And
that's you're giving me a sense of the vocal style there, and it sounds.
Nothing really holds a candle to the solemn warmth you feel inside.
It just occurred to me that you've got a thing, a recurring thing for these. For some reason, I'm assuming that's a male vocalist.
That's a male vocalist.
Yeah, these particularly effeminate male vocalist deliveries.
That was a thing that
not to knock it.
No, that was a thing that I was trying to figure out about myself at the time, because I was like, okay, I can get into this and this and this. I can get into Lou Reed, who had his sort of cross-dressing. I only date trans women phase, and I can get into. I can get into James Mercer, who's a little bit swishy, and I can get into, this and that, but I couldn't get into, Pavement, and I couldn't get into Guided by Voices. I couldn't get into Sonic Youth. At least I couldn't get into the stuff that was sung by Thurston Moore out of Sonic Youth, because, this swaggery shit just reminded me of all the people who I couldn't stand in high school, essentially. Yeah. It was I feel like this music is going to bully me, essentially, and so... I was I probably couldn't access a lot of music that I might otherwise have liked because I just was like, I don't want to be in a room with the person who's singing this music.
Yeah.
And so I think that definitely drove me toward like a little bit more of the sort of swishy gender bendy stuff. Although not Bowie, weirdly, you would think. But again, like,
I can't even remember when I got into Bowie. There was definitely a Bowie thing that happened to me at one point.
Mm-hmm. Again, he's very confident, Bowie. Yeah, I like people who are, I like people who are prissy and poncy and a little too smart for their own good, but not, swaggery and sort of sexually dangerous in the way that Bowie was. Momus isn't sexually dangerous. Momus
he sure claims to be.
Tries really hard to be sexually dangerous.
I like how Momus is just going to be the guy we occasionally compare things to in this track.
Momus is the equivalent of the sexual poison dart frog. It's like, you're not going to touch it.
Some do, it would seem.
Yes, they do. Perhaps to their detriment. But regardless, I felt intimidated, I think, by stuff that was too mask.
Yeah, fair enough.
I eventually came around to it as I sort of became more confident as a person generally, and am able to appreciate more of that stuff these days. But at the time, it was a bit of a struggle. And it's like, but anyway, yeah. Go. I think it's your turn at this point.
Yeah, college was cool. I think I'll focus on the first album that like ever spoke to me because of the ways in which it was like intentionally hard to listen to. Mm-hmm. Was Third by Portishead. Oh, nice. This album is a really good introduction to quote unquote challenging music. It's not like the hardest, most complicated and abstract thing there is, but the basic way it works is by opening with a true banger that slowly builds and only stops building, like, it's just as it's about to get really great, it just abruptly stops, like right mid-phrase.
Yeah.
And then like the whole midsection of the album until the final two tracks is just loathing and fear. And like there's these kind of slow jazzy grooves that come up and fade away, like, and it's seductive, but it's mostly like just open despair.
It's a really sort of interesting thing where it's like a lot of music that I like, I had to work to like.
Yeah.
It's stuff that turned me off initially. Like even going back to punk, I was listening to stuff that was very bubbly punk, and I was like, but I should get into the real punk. And I was listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is a little mean and scary and rough, and like dissonant.
Yeah, like
and
that,
so,
but
but like I wanted to like this band, and so
Right.
I put the effort into figuring out what it was about this band that could be liked.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that sort of thing with Portishead, because like that album, first of all, their first two albums were both very listenable and like extremely groovy. But this third album just had a grip on me from the beginning, because like that first track is an extremely bold declaration that if you pay attention, this can be the reward,
Yeah.
And the final track is also the second to final track, which is kind of the final track is a denouement. The second to final track is the climax, in which like it sounds like there's a beat to it, which like a steady headbangable beat almost, which is kind of a relief. But then like when the chorus comes in, there's just this extremely warm, dusty piano chord, which after like everything you've been listening to is like the light shining in,
There you go.
And that I'd listen to Kid A and stuff.
Yeah.
But that right there was like, oh, this thing has an arc.
I think he thought about these things structurally like way more than I did. I mean, particularly like it was also, another interesting thing.
I've always been the structure boy.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about my personal experience with music is, or sort of the chronology of it, is that there's definitely a before I was in a band and after I was in a band.
Yeah.
Like, it changed the way I heard everything. Because when I was listening to music before I started making like the kind of music that I was listening to, I had like made classical music before, or like been in string orchestras or what have you.
Yeah.
But learning how that rock and roll, or that like the standard rock 4-piece was put together, and what made that sound and what made that sound, and how that it was mixed, and like what just. I remember going back and listening to stuff that I had listened to before, and just like it sounded completely different because I was hearing every instrument rather than just a gestalt, I was like, oh, this is doing that, that's doing that, that's doing that, that's doing that.
Yeah.
Like and before that I was like, is that a keyboard or a guitar? I don't care. You know, if it even occurred to me to ask, right? It was just a noise,
right?
You know, and it's like, it's possible that my take on it was less filtered before, but it definitely irrevocably changed the way that I heard music.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You have another album to throw out there? Another band?
Well, we're starting to get into like
pretty recent stuff.
I mean, no.
Yeah.
Like, I graduated from college 12 years ago.
Yeah, I guess.
But by the time I think that the next arc is like, I was a real fucking punk about music. Not punk music, but I was a real asshole about music when I was in college, and even like right after college, because I had sort of found this, like, I had finally been able to like music that was cool. You know, I had found this place in contemporary indie rock that I liked, and I had, you know, found all of these acceptable albums from before that I liked, and I was able to piece it all together and just be, you know, like...
The secret is that it's cool to be into whatever the hell you're into.
Right, you know, but I'd been into stuff that I had thought of as really low status forever.
Yeah.
And so I was so enamored of suddenly being into stuff that high status that I was a real jerk to everybody about their taste in music if I didn't like what they liked.
Sure.
I think that the next like big change in like me and music came when I met my friend Daniel at a terrible job, like a couple of years out of college, or maybe 1 or 2 years out of college, and he introduced me to Anticon.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I was like, oh, this is a completely separate narrative.
this happened earlier in my life than it did to you, but like it should be said during this Strux that one of the big things that made it easy for Isaac and I to become friends is that we had a surprising amount of crossover in the weird music that we liked.
Yeah.
And Anticon was a big example of that. The for me, it's the self-titled Cloud Dead album.
Yeah.
I think you like 10 a little better.
It's not that I like 10 a little better, it's that I heard 10 first.
Yeah.
So
I heard 10 first as well.
But 10 was the album that kind of was like, what's going on here?
Yeah, that was the album that made me stop being the guy who said that he generally didn't like hip-hop. Which,
right.
And, you know, after I went through this whole process, I started liking the more quote-unquote generic hip-hop more than I did then, but
yeah.
Anticon definitely showed me that it was an interesting form of expression with possibilities I hadn't considered, some of which are slightly embarrassing.
Well, it's interesting, like, you know, as embarrassing is the right word, but like getting into Anticon made me get into hip-hop, and getting into hip-hop as a white person makes you think about a whole different list of shit
It's true.
than getting into like rock or EDM does. You know, you have to reckon with the culture in a way that you really don't have to if you're making music that was made specifically for you.
Right.
When you start getting into music that was made for other people, then you really have to think about, they like this for different reasons, and there's cultural reasons to like the thing which are completely separate from what it sounds like, and then like, where am I standing relative to this? You know, what is acceptable for me to like, what's acceptable for me to participate in, what am I bringing, you know, and why is this so incredibly lame what that guy is doing? And so on and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that if I'm gonna narrativize this shit, I think that like getting into hip-hop through Anticon really, I mean, not that I didn't listen to some hip-hop before that point.
Sure.
You know, like, I liked the Fugees.
I can't remember who I liked. It was somebody.
I liked the Fugees. I probably listened to Mad Villain before I found out about Anticon, because it was, like, very in the news.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, it was really sort of a way to think about music in a way that I had never thought about music before, which I think really made me less of a dick about it.
I think, like, to put it into words, I think a huge thing that struck me about Anticon was the style of performance that they had going on there.
Yeah.
Particularly...
also, you know, I'd found the nerds again.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
It's always about finding the nerds.
It's definitely about the nerds, but, like... Yeah. And this crossed over with my interest in electronic music, right? Like, I liked electronic music, but I was never too interested in it, in seeing it performed, because it seemed either inscrutable or, like, even kind of scamish.
Yeah.
But that guy Gel, dude, he's not the only one of his kind, and this has gotten a lot more. You know, it's gotten to be a lot more of a thing than it was when I was encountering this. But you know, he's that guy with one of those.
With the MPC.
Yeah, how does that stand for? Something or other controller?
Yeah.
One of them.
Censor that.
One of them pads with the buttons that you push in the rhythm, and it makes the drums happen, and it's just incredibly like skillful what you're seeing transpire.
Yeah,
but what you're
drumming
hearing
with my fingers.
Yeah, but what you're hearing is this like highly sequenced sounding electronic beat, and here's this other guy like making a big show about rapping to it. So like I guess it took me out of my head a little bit music wise, which is a stupid thing to say about nerdy rap, but it made me appreciate the more bodily side a little bit more than I had.
I mean, if you haven't seen video from the Mush tour video that they put out, I mean, you have obviously, but you, the listener, have not. You can go on YouTube and watch like videos of like Reaching Quiet and Dos One and Boom Bip performing from this tour, or Cloud Dead. It's all really great in all sorts of different ways.
Dude, we're there again, but there's still so much more music to talk about.
There's always more music. The thing is, like, that none of this has gotten anywhere near talking about what albums are my favorite albums right now.
Yeah, nowhere close. I
so,
feel like I should just list them.
Yeah, okay. Five of your favorite current albums on the top of your head.
Ooh, 5, okay. Shaking the Habitual by The Knife. Alien landscapes addressed in a spiritual way. Turns out it's their internal landscapes. The best twist.
I thought that was the name of an album, but no, you were describing the first album.
No, yes. Second, the latest Autechre, Elsec. Just listen to this for a few days on shuffle, and you'll be in the situation where you'll be in the John Cage situation where everything out your window sounds like music. That'll do. Those two.
Okay, cool. The albums that I've been listening to the most recently are Necrophones and Love Is Love by Lungfish, because I really dig repetition, and I have come to genuinely appreciate. This is exciting.
We've done this once before. It confused us more last time.
I've really come to appreciate words that don't make sense.
Yeah.
In much the way that Josh has circumvented words mostly by not listening to music that has words.
But I have been into the words that don't make sense thing. Remember Alex Lukashevsky, Deep Dark United?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's that. But yeah, I've been mostly listening to those Lungfish albums lately. But the latest Deerhoof is really good, and I want to spend some more time with it.
Oh yeah. It's a surprisingly polite Deerhoof, but an effective one.
Extremely melodic. It's one of those things.
It's
where
like they've calmed down and just made a nice album.
It's like a pastiche of a bunch of their different stuff from before, which is like acceptable if it's your 13th album.
Yeah.
Particularly when it sounds as fresh and muscular as it does there, which is very good. But yeah, my favorite. I think that like if I were to list favorite albums at this point, it would be albums that I have listened to over and over and over again because of the effect they have on me.
Right.
More so than for like, whatever I find admirable about them. So it's like Mirrored by Battles, Of Wars in Osteria by Fairyland.
Are we going to list all of
Fang Island by Fang Island? I don't know. It's like, really sort of upbeat, intense things.
I can't do this, dude.
Okay, well then we're not gonna. It
seems like I'm so close. The one chapter of my development that I left out in this conversation is that just as I was getting out of college, I had a huge Philip Glass thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I haven't talked about like my relationship with classical music at all.
Yeah.
A few years out of college, I read a book called The Rest Is Noise by...
It sounded like you said you wrote it.
I read a book called The Rest Is Noise by... I believe it's called Alex Wright, but I could be mistaken.
It's on my shelf. No, it's in my Kindle, never mind.
Yeah, but regardless, I use that as a jumping off point to find a lot of 20th century composers, and I think if I was to list like my favorite music, just as music at this point, a lot of people like Kodai and Hindemith. And,
oh my god, I didn't even go into jazz.
Yeah, no, I mean,
dude,
the problem with this...
Hold on, I have to say it clearly so they can hear. Miles Okazaki, Figurations, so good.
There's too much music. This is the problem with this.
Like, I can't listen to it all anymore, Like, yeah. I don't have a time in my life when I can listen to these things.
We had, like, Buke and Gace on in the
yeah, Buke and Gace is so good. We went and see them. We went and saw them a couple times. Always great.
And it's just, like, really good, but it wouldn't occur to me to mention them because there's too much music.
Big Thief.
Big Thief was really great when we saw them recently, yeah. We were listening to... oh, boy. We've listened to so much things.
All right, thanks, Water Warp.
Yeah,
we listen to everything we just mentioned and get back to us. You didn't even mention Bonnie Prince Billy. That is
Superwolf. What an album!
God, what else for me, man? So much, too much.
Yeah.
Let's.
All right,
It's time
we
to
gotta
stop.
stop. 50 minutes. Bye.
Bye bye.